Ain't no half stepping with Marcus J. Live from the Den, Legacy Internet Radio. Thank you, thank you, thank you for rocking with us as we continue throughout the night. Of course, having an outstanding show, as we always do. No surprise there. So, want to kind of move on with the show and kind of get into a couple of things. I mean, I had a whole bunch more stuff, and just with the First Lady and Madrika going through the stuff and Grizzy earlier, we just run out of time. So there's a few things that I want to get to. I'll just kind of quick hit them a little bit. The first thing that I want to do, before I bring the ladies back in, a good friend of mine, a brother by the name of Bill Maher, he actually had a really, really cool monologue. Not even a monologue, but it was just a comment that he had made on a recent show speaking about domestic terrorism and guns. A lot of conversation about guns right now. And take a listen to what Bill Maher says, and the ladies and I were going to talk about it. Take a listen, y'all.
Okay, let me ask another question about guns. And I know it drives Republicans crazy when liberals say everything's about race, and everything isn't about race. But I feel like guns is the one area where if you can't see a giant difference between the way black and white are treated in America with guns, I think there's a little racism in you. I mean, show the Roy Moore video. Here's a politician waving a gun at a rally. Could you get away with doing that?
In succinct, no.
There you go. And the Vegas shooter himself, it seems like when the shooter is, if he was Muslim, certainly would about, we got to get the band going. If it was a Mexican, it would be about the wall. And I feel like when it's the white guy, it's like, we don't know how this happened. But they don't, and we don't, I feel like it never gets to be an isolated incident if you're a minority. They always drag in and this guy was from a broken home. His father was a criminal. That would be big on Fox News, I feel like.
Right. I mean, President Trump would already be out there with his own motive for the shooter if the shooter were non-white. I mean, he does this anytime that there is any type of attack perpetrated by someone who is non-white. He doesn't take the whole, it's too soon to talk about it, we shouldn't speculate before we know the facts. He only does that in very specific cases.
Ain't no half stepping with Marcus J. Live from the Den, Legacy Internet Radio. All right, so I wanted to play that kind of to lead off this next piece. And First Lady Madrika, y'all already know I'm going with the shooter in Vegas. I'm not going to say his name. He doesn't deserve it. It's kind of like the sporting event where the jackass runs on the field and they don't show it. I'm not going to say his name. We say Vegas shooter. We know who we're talking about. But the angle that I want to take, Madrika, I want you on this one first. This dude was able to get 33 guns purchased in the last year. Now, I ain't gonna get too much into my business, but I'm somebody that supports the Second Amendment. I think if you want a gun, you should be able to get a gun. And you should be able to do whatever it is you need to do with a gun. Like this whole thing about gun violence and all of that kind of stuff, it's a legal crime like every other illegal crime. You got to deal with the illegal people. I mean, you got to deal with people doing illegal things. So I have a problem with messing with people who have their guns legally. Having said that, I also think that a person that has 33 guns in 1 year is a problem. I haven't bought 33 guns in my life. Most people I know who are weapon savvy have not bought 33 guns in their life. This man bought 33 guns in a year, and that ain't even all his guns. I think they said he had almost like 47 guns. He bought 33 since October of last year. And there's so many different angles that we can take with this Vegas shooter thing, and we don't have the time to really get into it the way, we normally break stuff down. I just want to speak to certain pieces, and so that was the piece that was important to me. Madrika, talk about whatever part of this story is important to you.
Well, I
I do agree with the Second Amendment. I am a gun owner. I have a few guns. I don't have nearly 33 guns, not even remotely.
Yeah.
I feel like 33 guns, you're building your own arsenal. You have enough guns for your private militia.
Yes.
So it's obvious we need some type of gun regulation. Look, I have, like I said, I have a few. That is enough to protect me and my family. 33 guns, who's coming for you that you need 33 guns to protect you and your family? Obviously, if you are getting that, unless you are an antique gun collector and these guns are not even fireable, what sane human being needs that many guns in their home? Not for the militia that you're working on part-time on the weekends. Your home, you need that many. And then the domestic piece, the domestic terrorism. What are we afraid of that we cannot call non-people of color domestic terrorists? If his name was Ishmael, Habib,
Or Madrika.
yeah, or Madrika, it would already be, I'm this, my hobbies are, they would have dug all in my past and everything. I would have been labeled a domestic terrorist from the very minute I took the first shot. But we're afraid to say that when it's a person of non-color, and I just don't understand why.
And I totally agree because, you know, again, you have someone who has already killed a woman with their car, and which I'm speaking of the incident in Charlottesville, and then now you have this person who has just wreaked havoc on human beings, on their livelihoods. This, and Madrika, you said, you know, who was coming after him. The main question is, who was he going after? Because, again, within a year, he purchased these guns. So, again, what happened to his psyche, or what happened to him within this last year that he said, okay, I'm going to need to collect all of these. And as we know, you know, when they stated how when they broke into the room, that he had a piece of paper with the numbers on it and how he had calculated how far he needed to shoot and how far the bullets would go, which each thing. So, of course, if he's trying to take these people out, then he has got to get different guns to do the things that he wanted and needed to do. So I think even though it hit me, the whole incident, you know, when it happened or when it became breaking news, I think one of the stories, like all of them, they all hit me and touched me because it's like you can't even imagine. That's like us going to a concert, you know, downtown Richmond, and somebody, you know, Kanawha Plaza when they used to have them, and just somebody opening fire. But I think one thing that got me is a mother was talking about her daughter who was at the concert. And again, yes, we have to pay respect and remember the 58 that, you know, that got killed. But the other 500 who have to live with these lifelong injuries, these life-changing injuries that they have to, you know, go on with the rest of their life learning how to deal with now. One mother said that her daughter got shot in her right eye. So just think the high power rifles that he had, you know, her taking a bullet to her eye, you know, and again, they're trying to see the brighter side for it. But she's like, you know, the bullet, it went straight in down her eye. So it didn't cause any swelling to her brain. I think they said the bullet ended up going through her kidney or something like that. So, you know, thinking about the ones who've passed away, but for the ones that he has caused and this lifelong effect on. So again, I feel that domestic terrorism or terror period is something that you have basically feared. It calls these people to stand at a standstill, you know, not to be able to move, shook, any way that we want to put it. So how is it that, again, like you said, unless they have a name that we can't spell or they're not from here, it's not gonna, he's never gonna say it. He didn't call the man in Charlottesville who hit the woman, you know, terrorism, which they caused terror all down that street. And again, with the Vegas shooter, you know,
it doesn't fit what the unwritten doctrine for the American speech for them to call white people terrorists. Sometimes they will, because they'll have no choice. Like Timothy McVeigh, they had no choice. They had to call him a terrorist. Eric Rudolph, they had no choice. He blowing up abortion clinics. He had to be called a terrorist. Theodore Kaczynski, he had to be called a terrorist. But Dylann Roof was never called a terrorist. And this guy has never been called a terrorist, and a lot of them have never been called terrorists. And it speaks to the code language that we have in this country. Lee Atwater in 1981 talked about how, and Lee Atwater was a Republican strategist who was an advisor to both the Bushes. And he died young, died 40 years old, had brain aneurysm. But in 1981, he got caught on a hot mic talking about the Southern strategy. And y'all can Google this. Shout out to our sister Edie. She's saying she's late, but she's here. Shout out to you, sis. The Southern strategy basically was how they decided that they were going to use code language. In the 50s, you can't use the N-word anymore. Well, it's going to be like that. In the 50s, you can say the N-word, but in the 60s and the 70s, you can't use that kind of terminology anymore. You have to say busing. So you can still talk about black folk without talking about black folk. In the 50s, you can just straight up call them what they are, the N-word. And this is how he's teaching Republicans how to use code words to mask what their actual intentions are. And it's only intensified as time has passed. That's why when you say terrorist, even we as black folk who are woke, whether we want to or not, we think of a Middle Easterner. When we say immigration, illegal immigration, instead of thinking that the majority of the illegal immigrants are people that are on expired visas that come in from Europe and Africa, instead of thinking about that, educational visas, like people who come here to go to school and work, those are really the ones that's illegal because their shit's expired and their numbers are higher. We don't think about that. When we think about illegal, when we think about immigration, we think about Mexicans, right? When we are talking about violence, gun violence, we think about the hood. We think about Chicago. We think about Richmond. We think about Jersey City, St. Louis. We don't think about the crazy white boy who goes and shoots up his school or shoots up a mall or shoots up a church. We don't think about none of that kind of stuff. You don't even think about white people when you think about mass murder. You should, because in the last 15 years, 92% of the mass murders were committed by white men. White men. 92% were committed by white men. And so mass murder is defined by 4 or more people shot. They don't all have to die, but 4 or more people shot at one time in one place. That's mass murder.
I'm telling you, the DC snipers messed it up for us.
Well,
they messed it up.
I'm glad you said that, First Lady, because
dag it all.
She
messed it up. I just knew they was white.
Edie's saying peace. She's saying it's a setup. She's saying it's a setup. But here's the deal with that, right? If you really want, and you're never gonna convince white folk of this shit. Like you just not. Like there's some who about it, and there's some that, you know, are intelligent enough to be about it, but they choose not to be. And then there's the ones that literally have their head buried in an elephant's ass, or the sand, whichever one you choose. But here's the deal: they're never going to get it because they have no reason to get it. They have no win for getting it. You know, you can worry about your own situation without worrying about somebody else's. You worry about somebody else's, then you got to have empathy. And it's too hard to have empathy. You don't want to have empathy because then you got to work. And who wants to work when they don't have to? You don't got to work. That's their problem. And so you come up with every excuse possible to explain away shooting a man in the back who's running away, or strangling a guy who's saying, leave me alone, or shooting a kid in an open carry state with a toy gun, or shooting a man in a freaking store who is looking at a gun in a gun shop. Like, these are real stories. These are, you know, somebody who gets shot in the back. Oh, my bad. I thought it was my taser. You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't have to empathize with any of them. Why? Because you're the default. You're the default in this country. That's why when you see Dove with their advertising of the black girl taking off the shirt and turning into a white girl, and you got black people that say, oh, it's not that bad. See, it was an Asian girl after that. Okay, yeah, there was an Asian girl after that. So what? So what?
The whole concept.
White is right.
You know, white is right, black is wrong.
That's what they're trying to say with Doug.
The cultural conditioning, you know, and you had a lot of black folk who wanted to remind others that the bottle that said normal to dark skin was old. And they already apologized for that. But obviously that apology didn't take, because they messed up again. And I get that y'all think that it's not that big of a deal. I can dig it. But guess what? I think it's a big deal. And so you're not going to silence me, whether you are black, white, or whatever, because I strategically, and it's just me, I strategically make sure that when I speak on racial issues, it's going to be stuff that I think is some real shit. Like, I'm not going to be talking on nonsense.
And Marcus J, is only because we, for so long, black people, or, you know, we've been conditioned to be quiet and deal with it, even from the black home. You know, that's why we don't really get into talking about rape or pregnancy or anything like that with your elder grandparents. You know, God willing, my grandmother would be 102, you know, this coming in April. And if I even say the word sex to her, she gets really offended. Like, she really gets an attitude.
Yeah.
And so again, it's all about sweeping it under the rug. Don't talk about it. Just keep it moving. So therefore, if someone calls you the N-word, you can't even defend yourself, because, you know, just let him go ahead and do it. That's history or whatever. He didn't say it with the ER. He said it with the GA, so it's all good. You know, so it's just, again, it's conditioned behavior. And you're right, it's not going to change, because a lot of us, as we see, a lot of our black great leaders, when they stood up and said something, they got shot.
Yeah, they got killed. And that's the reason why you got a bunch of them now that's running around making money. You don't see no civil rights leader today that's not a millionaire. They all millionaires. When Martin Luther King and Malcolm X died broke, both of them, and so did Medgar Evers. Let me get some comments in from folks. Terry says, how did this man have time to write? Why the cart in the room? How he's able to get so many weapons in a hotel. Call me conspiracy theorist. I cannot believe the man worked alone. That ain't no conspiracy. That's common sense. You know, and, you know, you got surveillance cameras that could read the date off of a nickel, but not one of them picked up this dude messing with the cameras outside in the hallway. Like, come on, man. I almost cussed. Wow. And Grizzly's not even here. Our brother D-Train is checking us out. Shout out to my brother D-Train. He says they will never admit it. So get it as code to not admit it. So, yeah. I mean, you really got to analyze what he's saying right there. It's code to not even admit it. Like that's powerful, D-Train. Like I can totally dig that. Our sister Edie's still listening. She says Europeans are everything we are. They're terrorists. They're the immigrants. They're the thieves. Need I go on? I mean, real talk. I mean, a lot of times, and I guess it's human nature, when you got some shit with you, you try to put it on other folks when it's really your own flaw. So I could totally dig where she's coming from with that. Let's jump around a little bit, because running out of time. Did y'all hear about the white boy who was on Starbucks computer talking about he wanted to start mass killing people at Howard University? Yeah, this was 2 years ago. And they just caught up with him a week ago. 2 years ago, he's at a Starbucks. And he basically wants to start a race war by killing a whole bunch of people at Howard University. And he's tweeting and telling them that they all need to be off our campus by a certain date, or else he was coming for them. He was going to kill them, like literally. And so it took them 2 years to track down who this person was. Now, I heard folks talk about how it took them so long because you're not talking about an IP address, an IP address that is pinpointed to him. Like, if I type that stuff in here, yeah, they come for me. They would know. But if I go to your local coffee shop that I may not ever go back to, it might be a little bit more of a challenge to figure out it's me. But my thing is, you got this, and you guys haven't heard the story, and that's cool. But you got you got this dude who's a college student. Don't know how you get into college if you're also a sex offender, who's violating his parole by even using a computer, who goes on that computer and says that he wants to start a race war. Now, the reason why I brought this up is this story broke early last week, not Monday, but like Tuesday, Wednesday of last week, on the heels of the guy in Las Vegas shooting 600 people. You would think that somebody who had planned to mass murder black people at a HBCU, and probably one of the three most prominent ones, with the others being maybe Morehouse and Hampton and Spelman as well, so top 5. Howard University, this dude talking about mass murder at Howard University, and ain't nobody talking about it on the national wire. Just Marcus J. and Joe Madison. I mean, come on, man. What you think about that, Madriga? Can you see a world where nobody cares about the lives of young black people at a college?
Well, I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, the lack of empathy. And I think the lack of empathy comes from that this isn't my problem. I'm living in this bubble. So if I think these people really don't believe that these things that we as African Americans say are real. So when you have a man out here planning to kill students at a HBCU and that threat is not taken seriously, when we jump up and say, hey, this is what's going on, it's not fair, it's wrong, we're pulling a race card. And now it seems like our safety is in peril because even when we say, look, this is a problem, you're not paying attention to this. Why not? We are being told we're pulling the race card. Oh, that boy. Okay.
And so I just showed Madrick and Lissa P the photo of this pizza face punk ass.
He's upset because he got
well,
acne.
It all makes sense now.
Yeah, he upset.
This pizza face.
Okay, it all makes sense now.
He said, First Lady, it's not murder if they're black.
Yeah.
That was one of the things he said.
Yeah, and I'm sure that's what a lot of them probably say from him to Capitol Hill. But
let me read this quote before you start.
Okay.
Any N-words left at Howard University after 10 tomorrow will be the first to go. After all, it's not murder if they're black.
And how many people give a heads up before you come kill them? You know what I'm saying? So a lot of those things, like, I mean, please correct me, but how many have given people a heads up to say you better be going by this time or else I'm coming? And then they actually came at that time. Like I said, hey, correct Lissa P. But getting back to what Madrika said, again, going back to the home, you know that your family, especially if you black, always told you, mind your business. What goes on in the house stays in the house. My mother always told me, don't you be driving nobody else's car. I don't have insurance on nobody but you. Yeah. And I don't have it on that car. So, it's all about right. I'm going to take care of me. I'm going to leave your business alone. That's why a lot of the times we can't even listen to our friends or whatever, because for real, it's like, hi, yo, I got my own issues. You think we listening, but we really not, girl. But I mean, for real, but seriously, but you fine. It's all about for real, not being one to talk about things, to actually get it out in the open and do what we need to do. It's just,
and I think
it's sad.
I will co-sign on that.
It's sad.
I will co-sign on that because I believe that I just don't think that it's a matter of white people just not caring. I think it's a matter of this is too uncomfortable to accept that this is the reality that most of us as African Americans live in. Yeah. So it's easier to be like, well, that just, they pulling the race card again. Because to actually sit down and realize, no, when I get pulled over, I'm frightened for my life. Look, my father was a police officer, first African American police officer to retire from Henrico County. I believe in police officers. I don't have a problem with it. But even me, as somebody who has a legacy of law enforcement in their family, prominent law enforcement, I still get afraid when I'm pulled over. Yeah. So my thing is,
my daddy, he just retired. He probably was your boss.
Like, I'm still afraid. But my thing is, I think it's just a matter of them believing that it is not as bad as we try to make it seem. Like you hear the statements of just comply, just do what you're supposed to do. Well, you still can get killed when doing that. So
Yeah.
I think it's a matter of a lack of empathy. But I'd like to know, what is he being classified as? Is he a terrorist?
I mean, I think it's no question that he is, but I don't
I
think
know
that,
he is.
but he's not going to be
Yeah.
classified, and that goes back to what we said before. Let me get these comments in. Let's see. Edie says, "Now I don't mind using Dove. All them get from UNC on the come through with the hookup, and guess what? It keeps the profit, and Dove gets none."
That's
Say
my
what?
cousin.
Yeah. So Dove, and Terry said, so Dove thought it was representing diversity. Would it be wrong if the Asians were upset because they were represented last? Okay, that's an interesting way to look at it. Edie says, black genocide has been going against blacks since 640 AD, so people who are not black is desensitized to the killing of black people. She's saying white people don't care, sis. She's talking to you guys. Comply and die. And then Terry says, I think a lack of empathy comes from the fear of the power we as a people possess and don't know it. We are not accepting the power that is within us. We can take your money and run. We can use our vote to be heard. And people, we are pulling the race card, then play it. You know, I've been on the record of saying that, you know, we have bought into the whole crabs in the barrel mentality. I don't like the analogy, but I use it this way to make this point that the natural habitat for a crab ain't in no barrel. You know what I mean? And so we have this internal struggle that we have with one another, and we have been culturally conditioned and bred to not trust one another. You know what I'm saying? Like when you walk into a store and you see somebody who wears a white shirt in a store where everybody wears a white shirt, and if it's a white man, you think he's the boss. You just naturally think he's the boss. He may be the guy that's sweeping the floor, but you don't know. But you assume that he's the boss. He got on a white shirt. They wear white shirts in here. And he might be a little bit older, especially if he's a little bit older. You assume he's the boss. Whereas the young guy with the dreads, the black guy with the white shirt on, he might actually be the boss. You know what I'm saying? Like, and this is what we do. And that cultural conditioning comes from every time you see a police officer, he's white. Every time you see a teacher, she's white. Every time you see a doctor, he or she is white. Every time you see a lawyer, every time you see a judge, all of these people are white. That's why it's important for us to represent ourselves. I got into it one time with a white sister, a friend of mine. She don't like me too much because I talk too much black stuff, but that's her problem. But I got into it with her one time about Jesus and the image of Jesus being black for me. And, you know, she is used to seeing Caesar Borgia / Shaggy from freaking Scooby-Doo as the image of Jesus, which I think to me is one of the most, I don't want to be disrespectful, but Jesus wasn't white, y'all. And I ain't even a Christian, I'm going to tell y'all. Look at where he came from. And her position was, you know, it doesn't matter if you understand and you feel the message. And I said, well, you get to feel that way because he looked like you. But he don't look like me. And if my legacy and history in this country is that of white people oppressing people who look like me, oh, well, I ain't never oppressed you. I got you. I'm 43 years old in 2017. And do I deal with racism? Yeah. Do I deal with oppression? Yeah. It's subtle. James Crow Esquire, not Jim Crow. But guess who had to deal with Jim Crow? My dad, who's still living at 75 years old, who can tell me about coming back from the freaking war and having to go around the back of the building to get a drink of water. Like he could tell me these stories. And so if the people who made him go around the back of the building to drink water look like Jesus, then what is that supposed to make me feel with regards to my power in this world? If all I want is to have who I pray for look like me, that's the least your oppressive ass can do.
I mean, well, you got Megyn Kelly saying that Santa Claus is white. So we can't even have a fictional character.
But you know the crazy part about that? If you look at who Santa Claus was based upon, he was based upon a black dude. And that's some homework. I don't got time to really get into that. But research Saint Nick. Saint Nick was a brother. Ain't no half stepping with Marcus J.
I just want to say something real quick. And you know, Madrika, when you said as far as when the police pulls you over and, you know, you get terrified, it's so crazy because I think I got pulled over not too long ago and got the same feeling like, oh my God. But as soon as I saw he was a brother, I was good. I was like, yo, you can give me this ticket. I'm fine. You know, so that's really, really scary that we have that mentality now. I'm pretty sure we've had it for a long time, but it's just so scary. And it's like the real question is to Madrika and to Marcus J and to the whole Ain't No Half Stepping with Marcus J family. Is it ever going to change? Is any of this ever going to change? I mean, we continue to talk about it. We topics about it Monday through Sunday, every day on Facebook, Twitter, IG, everything. Is anything ever going to change for the minority? Ever?
Well, one thing that I will say to answer that question, and I'm going to say this, and then Madrika, you'll get the last word. But what I will say is, do I think things will change? Probably not in our lifetime, and probably not ever. However, I think we do ourselves a disservice when we have an opportunity to try and we don't, even if we're trying in vain, because we're trying not just for ourselves, but for our children and for our families and for our futures. So we have to try. I think sweeping racism and bigotry under the rug and acting like it doesn't exist does us all a disservice, because, and this is the realest thing I'm going to say, I don't think that this is going to change anything, but if racism is going to change in this country, and this shit ain't going to happen, don't take what I'm about to say to make y'all think that I believe this, but if racism is going to change in this country, it's going to be because white folks change it. It ain't going to be nothing that we done, because we didn't create this. Mm-hmm. We didn't create this. They did. And so if it changes, it has to be on them, because you have so many of them who don't even acknowledge the existence of it, and they think that we all just complaining. Let me get these comments in, and then Madrika, you get the last word. Terry says, she's saying, why haven't we seen the First Lady all night? I'll let the First Lady address that. Edie says, yes, it will change once we become segregated again. I do agree with that. First Lady, you want to tell Terry why we ain't seen you?
Because Terry and Dee Dee, I don't like Facebook Live. But before we go to break, I'll make sure that I say hello to all of you.
All right, Madrika, take the last word.
To answer your question, I do think that things can change. I think that it has to do with representation. I think we need to see more black judges, more black police officers. Well, I'm not even just going to say black. I mean people of color that are coming in with an unbiased view to elected officials, police officers, judges, lawyers. I think that also, not sweeping racism under the rug, I think that we need to have more conversations about racism. Every time you see it, it needs to be called out. You need to go, and when you see your fellow white person and say, hey, listen, this is a situation that this occurred, this is racism, it needs to be a dialogue. Nothing is going to ever change as long as we have this we're right, you're wrong. It has to be a meeting of the minds. We need to come together. We need to speak on it. And call it out when we see it. Don't be afraid somebody's going to say you're going to use the race card. I'm pretty sure somebody's going to say that about me in a few minutes. But just be prepared to talk about it.
That's a them problem. Ain't no hashtag with Marcus J. I said that Madrika would get the last word, but I'm going to give it to Edie because she's on it. She said racism will change once black folks start hitting them pockets. Say word. Ain't no hashtag with Marcus J. Live from the Den. Legacy Internet Radio. Gonna take our final break of the night. When we come back, we're gonna rant, we're gonna close. We got a history moment. Y'all see the calendar. Y'all know what today is, and you know I'm going in, and so is the First Lady. And you know how Steph Marcus J. Live from the Den, Legacy Internet Radio. We're losing our sister Madrika. Madrika, you want to say peace to the people that's been listening to you and us tonight?
Thank you all for listening. I appreciate it. Thank you.
And you know how Steph Marcus J. Live from the Den, Legacy Internet Radio. Taking a break. When we come back, rants and closings. Facebook Live shutting you down, bringing you back up. I'm your host, Marcus J. That's the First Lady. That's Madrika. We'll be back in a few. Y'all stay with us.
Hey, this is Warren Ballantyne, the number one truth writer in America, and I'm listening to my man, my brother, Marcus J. right here on Legacy Internet Radio.